Mallory Hayes sat at the bow of the small rowboat as dawn washed the river with pale light. The two small children at her side, her son and daughter, whom she had come to call simply boy and girl, pressed their faces into cloth blindfolds. Each nearly 5 years old, was stone silent and still, only Mallory's soft admonitions breaking the quiet. She tightened the cloth around girl's eyes with a careful tug and gave boy's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. They both nodded without a sound. Mallory's voice was steady but grave as she reminded them of the rule she had drilled into their ears from infancy. If the blindfolds came off, they would die. She kept her tone gentle, terrified of any hint of panic, for the children could not see how frightened she truly felt. The river in front of them was smooth and dark, and a faint mist clung to the water's surface. In that boat, at that early hour, Mallory's heart was beating only for these two small lives and the fragile promise of the day ahead. Beneath Mallory's calm exterior, her mind drifted back to the morning, 5 years ago, back to when the world had first begun to shatter around her. She was heavily pregnant then, waiting for her baby with anxious excitement. That morning, the news on TV was fantastical and terrible. Anchors were reporting neighbors leaping from buildings, families killing themselves in the streets. Mallory sat on her couch, clutching her belly, pale. Her phone was at her ear. Jessica's voice was weak. Just days earlier, Jessica had pleaded with Mallory to trust nothing she saw. Mallory had dismissed it as a paranoid scare. Now she realized with icy horror that her sister had been right. Without another thought, Mallory bolted out the door. The city had become chaos. Cars idled abandoned in intersections. Smoke curled above burned-out factories. Mallory's hand shook on the wheel as she drove toward an old church where she had hoped people would gather. By the time Mallory arrived at the church, armed only with her purse and a camera, she found familiar faces huddled inside. Felix, gentle and steady, was filling water bottles. Douglas, kindly and strong, carried crates of canned food. Cheryl clutched a small infant in her arms, baby Lucy, who gurgled and grasped at nothing. Charlie, tall and quiet, offered Mallory a heavy blanket. Even Tom, calm and protective, stood over Mallory's chair to support her. No words were needed. In that moment, they formed a circle around her. Tom eased Mallory onto a pew and sat beside her. They did not know each other well before this, but now they were a family bound by crisis. Outside the church, the world was screaming. Inside, for a precious moment, they were safe. In the weeks that followed, the church became their fortress. They boarded up windows, extinguished streetlights at dusk, and moved in near silence. Tom taught them to use simple sign language so they could communicate without raising their voices. Two of them stood watch with flashlights while the others slept, huddled together on the floor. Whatever was out there, a demon, a parasite, something could not be seen. If they broke the one rule, they would end up like the people on the news. One person could never accept such helplessness. Greg. The timid engineer from the neighboring town insisted that they needed to see outside to know what they were up against. He dragged old television sets and a camera into Tom's basement and rigged up a crude surveillance system. One night, Mallory crept down the hall and found Greg hunched over the screens, his blindfold pushed up on his forehead. He was mesmerized. "It's all over," he whispered to himself. The next morning, Greg was gone. His camera was still. The screen had gone to static. They realized in silence that they must not let curiosity kill them like it had killed Greg. Now, more than ever, they dared not uncover the world around them. Time wore on. Soon the church's supplies began to run low. At last, Tom made the hardest decision. They had to risk going out for more food. He found a grocery store still standing a few miles away. "We'd do it blind," Tom said, voice shaking with fear and determination. No one disagreed. At dawn the next day, Tom drove their old car through empty streets. Inside the grocery store was stifling and still. Shelves were mostly stocked with dusty cans and boxes. Without any warning, the lights snapped off and a howl of alarms tore through the store. Through the slats of metal, Mallory saw men's silhouettes rushing toward them in the darkness. Charlie dashed to the back. Mallory scrambled after her, but just as Charlie pried the fire exit open, a high-caliber shot rang out. Mallory heard Charlie cry out and slam to the floor. The exit swung shut again by itself. Under the harsh alarm lights, Mallory saw Charlie lying motionless. When they arrived at the church, nobody cheered. Charlie was gone. The next night, as Mallory sat watching the river roll by through a gap in the boards, her water broke. Panic spiked through her. The twins were coming. Cheryl knelt beside her, whispering encouragement. Mallory bit her lip as another contraction hit. Minutes later, with a long cry, her first baby girl was born into trembling hands. Tom caught the second child immediately, a son, his cheeks pink and lungs clear. Both newborns wailed to life. Mallory clutched them to her chest and finally, after all this time, wept tears of joy. 5 years passed in this fragile silence. They never took off their blindfolds. It had become as natural as the air they breathed. But each night, Mallory would press a kiss into Olympia's hair and hum a lullaby, and Tom would trace letters on Boy's palm to teach him the alphabet by touch. The children grew up in darkness, but not without love. They received transmissions from survivors informing them of a safe community hidden in the forest, accessible by boat along the river. As they leave their house, a group of unblindfolded survivors attacks them. Tom distracts them so Mallory and the children can flee. He uncovers his eyes and sees the entities, but manages to eliminate all attackers before killing himself. Mallory wiped away tears with one sleeve. Mallory and the children go blindfolded down the river on a boat, carrying the birds to warn them of the entities. They encounter several obstacles, including an unblindfolded survivor in river rapids. She rowed on, faster and faster, using every ounce of strength left to carry the children away. Mallory gripped the oar, imagining him steering them with her. Soon after the three reach shore, they are separated when Mallory accidentally slides down a hill. The entities nearly trick the kids into uncovering their eyes. Regaining consciousness, Mallory tells the children she loves them and where to find her. They eventually reach the community, a former school for the blind. The strangers gathered the children into warm arms and wrapped them in blankets, their touch gentle and sure. Mallory was lifted to her feet, the wet cold leaving her shoulders. The newcomers led Mallory and the children up to a cluster of wooden buildings. It was the safe haven she had long hoped for. Faces turned in welcome. She saw parents with babies, teachers opening their arms, all eyes clear and bright. Mallory's breath caught as a gentle doctor stepped forward. It was Dr. Lapham. Mallory, trembling, held her babies. At last she could see them fully. Olympia blinked up at her mother with big blue eyes. Boy. In a quiet voice she told them their names, Olympia for her brave daughter, and Tom for her courageous son, named after the man who had saved their lives. Their terror and loneliness were behind them. In this haven of hope and safety, Mallory finally let the future begin.